Welcome to Inspiring Women in Audit, the only podcast celebrating the achievements and journeys of women in the internal audit industry. In each episode, we spotlight the extraordinary stories, insights, and expertise of these dynamic professionals. Our aim is to amplify their voices, inspiring a new generation of women auditors to share their knowledge, experiences, and unique perspectives. Remember to check our show notes for links to our social media channels and to subscribe to the Inspiring Women in Audit newsletter. This podcast is brought to you by I4 Global Results Limited, the audit communication experts dedicated to transforming your audit reporting and your audit results through communication, optimization, and collaboration. Now, let's dive into this episode of Inspiring Women in Audit.
I'm excited today to welcome Perla Habchi to the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast. Perla is an Internal Audit Project Leader for the Government of Canada, the Chair of Advocacy and Academic Relations for the IIA Ottawa Chapter, and was named a 2024 Emerging Leader by the IIA. She has a passion for innovation and finding ways to add value and understands and recognizes the significant contributions that internal audit can make in enhancing value and refining innovative processes within an organizational framework. She also recognizes the importance of building the next generation of auditors and contributes to this initiative through various volunteering roles. Perla developed the Innovation System Internal Controls Framework featured in the August 2023 issue of Internal Audit magazine, which we'll talk about a bit later. She's also a recipient of the 2023 Internal Audit Vision Award, awarded annually by the Office of the Controller General at the Treasury Board Secretariat of the Government of Canada. Wow, Perla, so many accolades, so many awards. I can't wait to dive into a discussion with you. Welcome to the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much for having me. It's a true honor to be on your podcast to show women in internal audit and specifically younger internal auditors who are women who are looking into joining the field or even wanting to get a little bit inspired about some sort of career journey that I've been through so far.
Absolutely. And, you know, I listened to the podcast 15 Fun that you did with John Tabor, and you mentioned there that you hope to inspire young women in the profession. So I think this is a perfect opportunity to do that. I wanted to start with your entry into the audit profession. You have said before that it's an accidental start. Can you share how you first found yourself in this profession and, you know, what convinced you to stay?
Oh, yes, of course. I feel that my story is not very different from most internal auditors in the field. If you ask most of them, 99% will say by chance, by accident. It was a career pivot for them, and I'm no different. I specialized in finance in my undergrad at university, and I thought that my journey was going to involve a profession that is in the field of finance. And while I was still in university, and I do consider myself very lucky to have stumbled, and I use that word a lot, stumbled upon internal audit very early into my career, which honestly does not really start when you're still in university. So even earlier than my professional years. At the time I was working on campus, I didn't really like the job. I also wasn't really fond or keen and about joining anything finance related or even accounting. And I got an email from FSWEP, which is the Federal Student Work Experience in Canada. And it was for an internal audit role at one of the departments in the government. And I had no idea what it was, and I looked it up a little bit, just got a little bit familiar with the job, and went to my interview. I interviewed for the job, and I got the email back that I did get the job. And it was a summer position, so nothing was really guaranteed. It was for 4 months, but I went in with the dedication of figuring out what internal audit is about, determining whether this is something that I wanted to pursue, because at that point I was in my third year of university, and as someone who's very type A and very organized, I needed to know exactly what career path I needed to start taking once I graduated the following year. So I joined the team, And within 3 weeks, I was head over heels. And it's very funny to say that because it's just fed everything, the curiosity and the just how my brain was wired, and it still is wired that way. I'm very analytical. I like the unknown and I like to piece things together to figure things out. And that's what this job gave me. And that's where I realized that this is something that I really wanted to do. I wanted to learn as much as I can. I wanted to contribute as much as I could within those 4 months. And obviously the rest is history. I stayed on with the team and I've been an internal auditor ever since.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And the penny just dropped for me as you were talking, because even though I know a little bit about your history from the research that I've done and the conversations that we've had, I just now saw the parallels, because when I was at university, also in Canada, I ended up applying for a job through the student program, and I was the third choice out of five because I had to do a remote interview, I'm guessing, so they didn't get a chance to meet me, but the first two didn't want it. I ended up, and I'll say the name of the organization because I don't think it exists in that format anymore. I ended up at the National Energy Board in Ottawa for 4 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then I went back for the next 3 years. So I did it all 4 years of university. And it really, really was a really good start. When I reflect and listen to your story, I think it's brilliant that you actually got a job in audit, because back in the time when I did it, I didn't even know what audit was in first year university.
Yeah, me neither. I never heard of it. We never had any guest speakers in internal audit. We never had internal auditors from the firms come in. A lot of the networking events were centered around public accounting, CPA tracks, CFA tracks, not much surrounding internal audit. And that is something I talk a lot about is where are the internal auditors? Where are you? Show up, please. Tell
Right.
the students that you exist and we're having so much fun. Don't keep it a secret. It's
Right.
not good to gatekeep this. In the past, you would gatekeep something because it's just like so good and you don't want others to find out about it because you don't want to oversaturate the market or whatever it might be. But now that we're looking into a gap and we don't have enough supply for the demand, don't keep it a secret. It's very important to not keep it locked in your heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I met audit in third year university. I had one course. Can you imagine? Only one course.
It's
And
still the case.
fell in love. That was it.
Yeah.
I was never going back to bookkeeping with the federal government. So when you first started, what surprised you most about internal audit?
So it's the misleading name for sure. It says internal audit. I was in accounting before I switched into finance. And the word audit just means numbers, long processes, compliance with like CPA and standards and all of that, and just long hours as well. Just from the experience of speaking to a lot of auditors that are in private or public sector saying that we work 80-hour work weeks and all of that. So that was a little bit of a, you know, scary thought because it was exactly the same factors that drove me away from accounting to finance. Not that the hours are any better in finance, but I thought maybe this type of number analysis speaks more to me than accounting. So that was the first thing. And then I discovered that it was completely the opposite. While there is some like quantitative analysis, it's very qualitative. And even though there are a lot of skill sets that are greatly transferable for internal audit, there's some skills that are very important, like being able to be analytical. Critical thinking is very important. That spark in your brain that takes place when you're making a relationship with point A and point B, but then you're like, okay, these two together, that's why this is happening and this is how you can solve it. And it's that telling that story and recommending and providing value to the organization. That's what really peaked for me. And it was completely different than, auditing the books and bookkeeping and yeah,
And very different
exactly.
from finance. Very, very different from finance.
Very different for sure. Yes. Honestly, don't ask me a single finance question because I have no idea. I completely forgot what I learned in university. But definitely a lot of good transferable skills from, being a good student in university did prove to be great in my career.
So how long did it take when you started that job for you to go, okay, audit is where I want to be?
3 weeks.
That's
Yeah.
it, 3 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's very important to point out that it took 3 weeks to 4 weeks because I was very involved in the office and in the internal audit process. So it wasn't that long before I was completely involved in the auditing process in an internal audit project where I started right off from the planning phase, and I had great mentors. I had great people at the office that were willing to teach me what an internal audit was, how the process is like, how the line of questioning needs to be drafted when you're going into an interview with your clients, how to draft your risk statements, your risk assessment. So I was really involved in a lot of aspects that maybe a student wouldn't really be involved in, especially if this is their first time doing internal audit or even any job really. But I think my managers felt that I was ready to take on something like that. But it's very important to create that culture and that environment for someone to be able to determine whether this is something that is for them or not. Because at that point, they're making an informed decision based on all of the metrics and all the different criteria or situations that you're putting them in.
I think that's a beautiful way to start. I know when I started at Deloitte, I was in external audit, and what I learned to do was like audit cash. So it sounds like what you were doing was a little more exciting um, than auditing cash. However, I am grateful. I had a great experience at Deloitte. I'm not trying to knock that. Listen, you mentioned storytelling. I'd like to dive into this because when we talked earlier, you mentioned to me that every finding has a story. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes. So the reason I say that is because when you're writing your report, you're just presenting the information and your rationale based on the analysis that you've done. But for an auditor, it's so easy to just detail the steps and say, I found this and I found that. But for the client, you're trying to convince them of what you found, especially in times where they don't want to hear about what you found. Not that it is a surprise in most cases, but you have to draft it in a story. It tells you a story of long, long ago, this is what happened, and this is why you're in this problem right now, and it's no one's fault, but this is how you can fix it. And it's a lot of it takes a lot of skill to be able to formulate words and sentences in a way that is very diplomatic, that is neutral, that doesn't have heavy language or even simple language. Using simple language to convey a message, and that is very concise as well, is an art that I even don't possess the skills for. But I've met a lot of people that are just so great at storytelling, even when you sit with them for 5 minutes and it's just, wow, okay, you convinced me, I'll fix the problem. And it does like create a good relationship with the client when you use that softer language and you're telling them the story of that root cause that is leading to these findings and leading to those recommendations.
So do you feel like there's a difference between storytelling in the public service governmental
Mhm.
reports the difference between that and corporate?
That's a very interesting question. So I will say one thing, it's very different when it comes to internal and external audits. So if you read OA, like Office of Auditor General reports, very different than internal audit reports. Auditor General reports are very straight to the point. Um, they can be scrutinizing. It's not an issue. But when you're in internal audit, it's a balance of the relationship with the client, but also getting the message across. But there's also the element of certain reports becoming public. So now they're public facing, the public is reading those reports. So there is a tendency to be more careful about the wording as to not being misinterpreted. You don't want the public misinterpreting or misrepresenting your findings, and then it becomes a whole news story and it's being misrepresented, and it's just like that, as you say in French, téléphone cassé, like it's the game of telephone where part of the message keeps getting deleted until it gets to your final
From
recipient.
person to person, it
E-
changes.
Exactly. And it's very important to maintain a public image for the government as to not, lose the trust of the public. And that's very important, obviously. And as internal auditors, we are transparent and we are very objective. And that's why these reports are public, to inform the public of deficiencies and the government's role in improving them, monitoring them, and mitigating any risks. So it's definitely different in public sector, definitely more concise. I will say that. They're shorter, very concise sometimes, depending on what is being asked by the client. But from my experience, it's a little bit different. But in government, we have to be way more detailed to support our findings.
That's interesting because I have read Government of Canada reports. I think they're
They're
super well,
long.
they're long, super well written, super well presented. Definitely storytelling involved there. I do think an audit report should tell the story of
Mhm.
what the unit, the process, whatever it was that was being audited, but also in a nice, concise, clear way with without too many details. It's like, what does this mean? This is what I want to know.
Exactly.
Here's the result, and what does it mean to the organization or to the department that you're working with, or whichever it
And,
is.
and the style is definitely different across departments. It's not a specific format or template that everyone follows. So it
Okay.
just depends on preference as well. But the communication aspect, very important to be very clear so as to not be misinterpreted.
And do you have any techniques or strategies to help get like findings across the line where they might be perceived as harsh or critical?
Yes, I think it's different for everyone. And in my case specifically, I'm very diplomatic even when I'm speaking or delivering findings to someone. It's very important to make the reader or even your client that is facing you in person comfortable and very confident in your abilities as an internal auditor to be delivering those findings. So as long as you maintain a great relationship throughout the audit, the client has full confidence that whatever you find is substantiated and it's not personal. And that's also part of the wording, is that when you're wording your finding, it's not pointing to a specific individual, it's not pointing to a specific group, it's pointing to a process, to a document, a policy, and softening it with areas of improvement definitely helps. And in most cases, root causes are very complex and they're not attributed to a person or a function. They can be attributed to multiple pieces of a puzzle that then contribute to this high risk area that needs to be mitigated. But it's definitely it's a hard task to do, that's for sure. Every time I'm writing a report, I write it out and then I think about the wording and I put myself in the position of the client. Is if I am sitting here and reading this, is the context that I'm delivering enough for me to support this finding? And is the logical flow appropriate? Is this something that when I read, I completely understand that, yes, I can't really refute this. All the evidence points to this deficiency. And it is something that is risky. And using those very tangible examples, it's not, general, this will lead to that. No, this will affect this very specific thing, which will lead to this very specific thing. And if you don't, face this in the next 6 months or 1 year, these are the consequences. So when you contextualize the findings in that way, and it's not to catastrophize things, but there's a risk and impact for everything, and you have to be very honest about what that risk and impact can be.
When I do my report writing training, I talk about, and this is my language, not something from the IIA, I talk about a risk ladder. And starting out with what could happen, and then 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 what could happen. And then you get all the way to the top, and then you don't want to be accused of overly dramatizing. So you've got to come back down to what is reasonable within the context of really what's happening. But if you lead them through up the ladder or down the garden path, however you want to describe it, where they understand the knock-on effects of those things and what they could have, but starting with the kind of the starting, what operationally could happen, what could go wrong tomorrow, what might not happen tomorrow, what are we exposed to today and tomorrow until we close this, and put it in terms that they understand. I think that's how you get those risks communicated well.
There's also different types of risks. There's risks that are actually there, but there's also the risks that your client cares about. And this is where you start wording things in terms of what is important to them. Because if something is important to them and it goes wrong, that's when it's that switch of alertness, like, oh no, like this might happen. I need to act fast. And sometimes there's risk that they're so willing to assume and take on, and you have to get that message across, like, no, this is, risk threshold here is not really great. You need to reassess this, and it doesn't appeal to them. It's not something that they want to worry about or was not on their radar or they don't think is important, or the likelihood of it ever happening for them is low, but realistically it's actually not. And so it's that framing that is very important too. It's framing things in what is essential and important to them. It's a little
I
bit
think
of
that's great.
psychology, I say,
Yeah.
but
Definitely some psychology in there. But when we present things in terms of what they care about, you have the opportunity to create a different response. That's how I like to put it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'd like to switch topics now and talk about the Auditing Innovation and the Vision Award. So you developed an innovation audit framework that earned recognition through the Internal Audit Vision Award. First of all, I mean, congratulations. That's an amazing achievement. And I know because you've been an auditor for 7-8 years.
Yeah, around that, yes.
And
including my university years, yes.
And you're winning awards for innovation, which I think, just shows your passion, number one, and how you love to contribute to the community. So that's what I see. But when you created that framework, I'd like to ask you first, what problem were you trying to solve?
Yes. So funny story. When I created that framework, it's not really funny, but it was during the pandemic. And at the time, it was two decisions that I needed to make. Do I pursue my CIA, or I just graduated and let me apply for a master's degree? And for some reason, when I was an undergrad, I really wanted to do a master's degree. God only knows why. but it's something that stuck. I wanted to do a master's degree no matter what, and I applied, and then came the question of, what am I writing my thesis on? Because it was a thesis master's, and within the choices that I had to specialize in my master's degree, accounting was out of the question, obviously. Finance felt repetitive, so I didn't really want to do that. So there was innovation management, and that piqued my interest. It was a moment of reflection of, okay, I had a management of innovation course when I was an undergrad, and that's something that I really enjoyed. I loved that class. It was just a way for me to like be creative and find out more, and it just so many things to learn about in terms of innovation and theories for innovation. And at the time, I worked at a department, which I started off at when I was in university. I was still there. Um, a lot of innovation programs were being funded. And I started realizing, okay, so these programs are being funded now. It's only going to be time for us as an internal audit shop to be auditing these programs. And innovation programs are very different than any internal process within the organization, like that is very typical, like HR, finance controls, and all of those areas. Innovation involves different actors. It involves, external stakeholders that are innovating with the government. And when you become external like that and you're involving more stakeholders, there are other risks. And obviously third-party risk is the first thing that comes to mind. So I realized that this is the gap that I wanted to fill. But it is not a gap until you find out that it is actually a gap. So it might be a gap in my brain because I think that nothing exists surrounding this. So you obviously have to do a lot of literature reviews to figure out if this is something that exists. And it did not, lucky me. Uh, Otherwise, I would have had to choose another topic. And I wanted to do something that did not exist. I wanted to like put a lot of effort and time into just creating something that is useful, that does not exist. I didn't want my time in my master's degree to be wasted or to just coast by and say that, okay, I did my master's, I got my degree, on to the next thing. It was also COVID. I had a lot of time to to do things and just, be more motivated and motivate myself to do something. So yes, the literature review definitely pointed out to nothing existing besides the private and technology sector, which is completely different than public sector because you're not producing a product, you're producing a service of value to the public. So very different. So that was the gap that I was trying to fill, and it was a really nice long journey of a lot of research that took place and a good frame, I would say, good frame. I thought my baby because it took 9 months to develop it, exactly like a human. And that was the result. I defended my thesis and ended up presenting the framework to CAEs across the government, and that's how I ended up winning the award.
That's amazing. Well, tell us about this framework then.
Yes, so I try to explain it in a sense where if you can't visualize it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So one thing I try to establish is that within an innovation system, there's three simple actors. It can evolve to more than these three actors, but the three essential ones are the public sector, which is the government, academia, that's where your researchers are, they're conducting the research, which can also collaborate with government in terms of research. And then you have private sector who might have the funds or the capabilities of innovating, but they don't want to innovate because at that point there's a funding risk and they don't want to assume that risk. So that's where the government sometimes come. But I also wanted to prove that the role of the government was not just to create policy surrounding innovation, or to fund innovation, but they played a bigger role than that. And that involved literature review, but also sampling internal audits that were conducted by the government in areas of innovation, like intellectual property or other innovation programs in the past, and copyright, for example, and programs that have grants and contributions components to them. And so that ended up with 6 internal control categories, which are essential for a successful um, innovation framework within all these 3 actors. And under each of the categories, there's a list of applicable audit criteria. And it ends up being around 73 internal audit criteria that you can choose from when you're developing your internal audit program, when you're auditing an innovation program or any sort of innovation within your organization. So that's pretty much the framework. It's publicly available on my LinkedIn, so anyone can go through the 10-pager that explains the methodology behind it, explains every single internal audit control category, internal control category, and then there's the whole list of the criteria there as well. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I love that you have it available on your LinkedIn profile. So we will
Of
make sure that
course.
as your LinkedIn profile, or if you have another link to it that you want us to share, we'll absolutely do that. So everyone has access to it, and the government of Canada is actively using this framework.
So it depends. Some of the departments have used some elements of the framework. I don't keep tabs, unfortunately. I wish to do that, just in terms of lessons learned, applicability, and improvement. But this framework stayed in 2022 when it was developed. It's still the same. It hasn't been updated, but I do like to do research on the side, so I've done other things since then. But yeah, I don't know if it has been used, but I've been contacted for it in the past, and have had questions about it. So my assumption is there's some sort of use of it.
And truly, to be contacted about it, I think is a signal or a sign of the success of it, really, because when we talk about just internal audit in general, and one of the measures, I think I was reading an article by Norman Marks this
Hmm.
morning, and he talked about one of the measures should be how often do audit clients come to us, right, in an advisory role. And so
Right.
that's kind of, I think, I equate that in my mind is that that's a signal of the success of what it is that you've done. So again, congratulations. But I'd like to know what it has meant to you to actually win this award.
Well, the first feeling that I had is that it proved that the 2 years that I spent in my master's were worthwhile. It was not an easy journey. I don't sugarcoat it at all. It was fully remote, even though campus was 15 minutes away. All my courses were online. I did not have any connection with my cohort, and it was very isolating. I will say that. It's not like everyone in my life was going through the same experience and I could just talk to them about how repeatedly you come to that block of like, oh my God, what am I even doing? What is this thesis even about? And what is it going to lead to? And it's just the pressure that I definitely put on myself in terms of delivering something that was valuable did not help, but I am who I am. And I've carried that my entire life. It's a double-edged sword. It's good and it's not good at the same time. But it was that first thought of like, oh my God, it was worth it. I did something exactly what I wanted to achieve. And it was also that moment of realizing that, oh my God, I did something that was worthy of recognition. That was surprising. I always, it's a weird thought, but I always think of my 9-year-old self. And it's just that like as if she's like sitting next to me, 9-year-old Perla, and just telling her, oh my God, this happened. And it's just like she wouldn't believe it, right? She would just say, what? How come? Like I would have never thought like I would get here. It's a lot of these moments, definitely in the last few years, and that was the first one of them. And winning that award really set me with the required confidence that I needed to push and to ask to be involved in more things. And I think definitely I am here right now because of that award and the confidence that it gave me. Um, yeah, that's exactly what happened.
I mean, it just shines through. No one's ever going to accuse you of being an underachiever, right? The
You
energy
never
that
know.
you like to research. There's all these things that show. So I think your 9-year-old self was hopefully very, very proud of you for achieving this. It's
I
it's a
think she is.
And we've talked a lot about university and the programs that you've done and how you got involved with the audit. Uh, in general, I know you're a strong advocate for student outreach, for internal audit and attracting future talent into the profession. Why is this so important to you to invest your time, because it is volunteer work, I'm guessing, and to invest your
Mhm.
time to speak to students about our profession?
It's because I never had it when I was in their position. Despite the fact that there are so many opportunities where there's networking events with employers and organizations that have professionals, and I'm speaking specifically to management and commerce. That's where I specialized in my undergrad. It was centered a lot towards accounting, CPA, and was not very fond about what I was hearing in terms of the work culture and the hours. And you also are speaking to students that all they know is being a student for a good 19 years of their lives, and you're just bombarding them with information about, well, you're going to work for the rest of your life, and nothing much of, enthusiasm or motivation towards just what you do. And it was like so rare to see that one person. And I remember in university, the one person that really sparked like the idea of things are possible, non-traditional careers they exist, was an individual that went to the same university as I did, and he came as a guest speaker in my management of information course. I think that was like in my first year or second year, and he worked for Disney. And he was just talking about all these things that he's done and the innovation and how he's developed the ticketing system that is embedded in your Disney bracelet, and you don't have to scan anything because it scans by itself. And I thought, whoa, this is out of this world. And it's just that passion that he was speaking with, that was the first time I've ever encountered it in university. Because you're surrounded by profs who just like to do research and not that passionate, I guess, about teaching. And that's
Mm.
something that I hear a lot. And then you've got your professionals that are coming because they have to come and tell you about how great it is to work at the organization. And you can tell it's not genuine. And that's why I wanted to do it. I wanted to go tell students that even if you don't have things figured out, it's okay. But this is an option, and it is a really great and cool option because you're not contained within a box of this is how we do things and this is how it's going to be for the rest of your life. No, it's just giving those examples of the different organizations that you can work in, the different areas of internal audit that you can work with, depending on your interests. If you're interested in cyber, go ahead, you can do cyber auditing. If you're more interested in like financial controls, there's financial control type of internal audit. There's IT auditing. There's information systems auditing. There's more HR types of audits. There's cultural audits. It's just very different. And it's not stagnant. As a profession, we're always evolving, we're always learning. It's part of our standards to continuously evolve and learn. I mean, how amazing is that? That, your standards are telling you, please keep
Innovate.
evolving. I beg you to keep evolving, keep learning. Don't stick to the same things of doing things. And that is probably an issue in some professions where it's just so stagnant and people are just stuck in their ways and it's hard to have change management. But that's why I do it. And it's not just me. I bring other people to come and talk about their journey and what they like about internal audit and just giving them the examples of the different industries that they can work in. So I do love it. It's just like every time that a student comes and is like, I never knew about this, but I really am interested and I really like it. And sometimes they don't say anything, but then I get a LinkedIn message like months later and they're like, I don't know if you remember me, but I was at this session or this panel or whatnot, and I really want to do internal audit now. To me, oh my God, I did my job. It just makes me so happy. Makes me so happy.
That's amazing. So can I ask you, like, what messages resonate most with the students that you talk to?
It's the message of you can start an internal audit. You learn a lot when you're internal audit. If you do realize that this is not for you, you've already gained enough skills to transfer into something else because you do get a lot of transferable skills. And another one is how our profession is global. So in terms of like, let's say other certifications, you have to kind of recertify or reprove that you qualify for the certification in other countries, while when you get your CIA, it's globally recognized. And that's the aspect that is very appealing for the students is the ability to be mobile. It's the mobility of the job. And if you decide today, I don't want to work in Canada. I want to move to Europe to just live a life. And you've done that, right? Um, it's possible. And I think that's very appealing to them. It's very appealing to international students as well, because we do have a lot of international students in Canada, some who might consider staying and having jobs here, and others want to go back home. But now you're sending them back with skills that they don't need to redevelop or develop for a job market back in their country.
I love that. And makes me reflect on my journey. And I was a chartered accountant. Now it's chartered professional accountant. But when I had that CA designation, it was like having a passport in my back pocket because I worked in the States and I went to Europe and all those different things. So it's whether you have a CIA, a CPA, whatever it is, it gives you kind of that credibility that you can travel around the world and those audit skills come with you. You don't leave them behind. No matter where you are, even if you went back to finance, you would still have the audit skills with you and that would benefit that whole organization as well. So that's a
You
positive.
definitely also have a different perspective when you're internal audit. It's very risk-based. Um, so your perspective, the things that you're looking into are definitely different than the professionals that are in those different fields.
And if we come back to working in the public service, so working for the government of Canada as an internal auditor, I don't have that experience. Obviously, I have corporate. What is it about it that it psychs you so much?
I'm smiling because it just reminds me of one very specific example. When I was a student and I was doing my internal audit work and I was contributing to one of the audits, uh, through and through, from planning up to the final stages of the audit gets published. And the second I knew that it was published, I just ran to find it. And I know what the report looks like. I've read it. But now I'm like, I am part of the public and I'm reading this report and I was just so happy. I could not stop sharing it with people. I was like, look, I worked on this audit. Do you want to read it? It's so cool. It's so interesting. And even now it's different because I'm a lead and I write the report. But when I was in my more junior positions, when I saw one sentence that I wrote in the finding sheets make it to the report, that was the best day of my life. Like I wrote this sentence exactly as it is, and it just made me so happy. But it was always the client feedback that was always great. The clients expressing their gratitude towards the findings and the value that the audit was bringing. And I always felt like I needed to not go through follow-up myself, but kind of check in on the follow-up process to see what happened. It's a good feeling. It's definitely, and this might be the same thing if I were in a private organization, but just the aspect of it being public was just it felt like a good milestone. It's public, it's done, the people can see what it is about and what we're contributing here as internal auditors in the public sector.
I can honestly say I don't think I've met a corporate auditor who is as exuberant about internal audit as you are. I'm just saying. So it's either something about working for the federal government, which I don't know if I'd ever thought about that in that context before, or it's just your delightful personality shining through so well in everything you
Thank you.
do.
That's very
So
sweet.
it's true. It's true. So you as part of this, internal audit team for the federal government in Canada, you are accountable to the general public. And I'm wondering, like, how does that shift your lens for what you do? Because when I do my audit report writing training and we talk about stakeholders, sometimes we get to the point where we're talking about shareholders of the corporation in the conversation, but it doesn't get there that often. So how does this public accountability influence you?
It's a very interesting question because there's definitely a few layers of senior management that are way more accountable than I am. And there's obviously a lot of levels of approvals until a report becomes public. But there's the last point is briefing the departmental audit committee about the audit as well as the deputy minister. So there's that point. This is when the report is final and then it can be published and now it's public. But I think the independence and the objectivity of the profession definitely helps with that accountability. It's the reporting straight to the DM who is accountable to the public. That's where it's important. It's kind of like reporting to the CEO who is accountable to the shareholders, right? Same model, but we have different audiences. And in a private organization, your public is your shareholders. They might be more in tune to wanting to know what the audit reports are, as opposed to the public. It just depends on where their interests lie and which audits they end up reading, right? So an audit report could be public and never read by the public, or just a very small majority of the public reading it. But it all depends on the risks that you're assessing. Obviously, it's different when it comes to like financial stewardship risks. That's where it becomes more tricky, right? Because the funds that a government organization has is funded by the public, and accountability here is very, very different as opposed to an internal process that, it has been assumed to be high risk, but it's not really affecting services being provided to the public or funds that are provided by the public. So it's definitely different. There's a process for petitions as well. So that's when the public puts in a petition and it gets sent to the associated department and you have to respond. And I'm not involved in that area, but usually professional practices is, but you just have to treat it as them being your shareholders, because they are. They're funding you. They're funding the government. They're funding your job. Um, the perspective is a little bit different, obviously, but they're your shareholders. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I haven't heard of a lot, and if anybody watches the podcast, they can let us know. I haven't heard of a lot of shareholders having access to internal audit reports, but in your case, the public can access your internal audit reports. So different environment.
Yes, unless there is very sensitive information that would compromise the government. But in all cases, very transparent. It's part of our internal audit policies in the government to be transparent and to publish reports.
And so I want to turn to a topic we spoke about briefly, which is the importance of being brave and speaking up in audit. Do you think this is an issue and that auditors struggle to speak up?
I think it just depends on the organization that you're in, the relationships that you have, whether internally as part of your office culture or within the department or the organization that you work with. I feel that with time, internal auditors are becoming more vocal. Um, Not that they weren't taking their jobs very seriously, but I feel now that we are trusted advisors and we're getting that recognition a little bit more, it does give us the confidence to be confident in our abilities and confident in the opinions that the very professional opinions that we are forming, and to speak up about them. It's definitely, and I think about it in two different ways. It's speaking up to the client, but also speaking up within your organization. I think it's very important for younger internal auditors who are passionate and want to innovate to speak up about different ways of doing things, being heard, and senior management making that space, that very safe space for your younger generation to be able to speak up and propose new ideas, new ways of doing things, and innovating in areas that you wouldn't have thought of, because this brings more motivation, it brings more critical thinking, more innovation, and more efficiency and effectiveness to your processes. And supporting people in those ways is just shows others that, it's possible to innovate in these ways. It's possible to contribute to internal audit in different ways. You don't have to do things the way we've been doing them for the last 10, 20 years, which is something that internal audit is steering away from, as the whole world is evolving in so many ways at a pace we can't even keep up with. You can't be stagnant. You can't continue doing things the way that they've been being done.
No, I mean there's so much innovation with, LLMs and,
Mm-hmm.
yesterday was Nano Banana and I mean there's just like everything's changing so quickly and it really does I think it's going to really affect audit work because how do you prove, the provenance of things? But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. So I
It
think
is.
what I'm hearing from you is like internally within the team, tone from the top and that openness and that welcoming of new ideas, innovation, perhaps of efficiency ideas. That's super important to the morale of team members because I totally agree with that. If you have the head of audit or whoever above who just likes things the way they are, it can really stifle talent and then you might
Exactly.
lose the talent, right? So the more open we are to their ideas and seeing if they work even, and then if they do work, then what can we do with it? I think that's super important just to our success as a profession because you wrote your framework during COVID and so much I think has happened in in the last 5 years where we're auditing at a pace or we're innovating at a pace in internal audit that we hadn't been previously. So this is super important to us. So
Exactly.
when it comes to junior team members coming on board, I can see two challenges. One is like, handling that, well, I have ideas. Will they accept my ideas in the team? I'm new. Should I just keep them to myself for a while? But the other one maybe that we could focus on is dealing with the audit clients and having the courage to get through some of those difficult conversations. How do you help them in their growth?
So for students, and that's funny because I made that joke yesterday at dinner. I was saying that whenever I have students join the team, the first thing I tell them, I'm your fairy godmother. I'm here to make your dreams come true. So we're going to sit down and kind of discover everything that you've done in university, what you're great at, and we're going to apply all of these here. Because it's important to make them feel that at least what they know is useful and then they can build on that, right? This summer we got economics students, and that was the best thing ever because they their analytical minds, they do economics analysis. They're just great at analysis and, creating things. So we sat down and we brainstormed a new way to figure out resourcing for small, medium, and large audits. And it was by doing a regression analysis of the past 5 years of time that was allocated towards the projects. And it was just a great way to kind of use the student's abilities, things that he has already learned, to feed into our own processes. So that gives them a sense of it's not all about new things to learn right now. You can apply things that you've already learned, and this is the application of it. This is how you can apply it in the context of internal audit. But I also like to see what they're interested in because I want them to have a good experience. And the more they have a good experience, the more likely they are to be passionate, be motivated, to learn more and stick with the internal audit. So measure of success here is if they come back, if you give them the opportunity to come back. And that's how you know that you did a good job, they like it, and they want to learn more, and they want to do more. Especially this generation is different. In the past, people just wanted a job, get paid. This generation wants value. They want value in what they're doing and what they're learning. They want to contribute. They want to feel that they are playing a role in the big chain of supply.
And to do that, you have to be heard. And
Exactly. And it's not because they're a student that there's like some sort of hierarchy that is at play or they're less experienced. Trust me, you can learn so many from anyone, whether they're students, they've been in the field for 20 years, they've been in the field for 1 year. It's very important to have the mindset of my learning never ends. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I actually want not to be the dumbest, but I want to be the one who's able to learn from everyone in the room, something new at least. And you can even learn from the student. I mean, I learned how to do the regression analysis in Excel from the students. So, I mean, that's something I didn't know.
I
So
was
I
going to
obviously you
say,
have to give
I couldn't do
credit.
that. It's not in my
Exactly.
skill set. It's not in my skill
And
set. But we do learn. We do
yeah.
learn from all around us. It's a 360 thing, right? If we're open to it.
Exactly, exactly. And you definitely don't want anyone within your team to hit a ceiling of learning and of knowledge. And that's why you have to have people with different perspectives. And in internal audit, it's very known that it's the complementing competencies of everyone on your team that forms that full competency. So you're not really looking for people who know everything, people who are specialized in certain areas, they have interests in certain areas. Very important to support that and help them develop those skills because they complement everyone else's skills, and that's how you deliver a successful product. And as a team, you show your competency to the clients. So to go back to your question of how to have those difficult conversations with the client. The unfortunate part is you can never know what to expect with the client and how they're going to react to certain things. It's definitely not personal. You never know. I've heard stories. I've heard stories of, being yelled at by the client, having to de-escalate. It's tough, especially when you're walking in not knowing what to expect, but all you know is that I have these facts and I have to present them. And it's all about how you present them. And if you've made them comfortable throughout the whole and I go back to this, it's the comfort. There's obviously a point where you have to be objective and independent. They're not your friends, obviously, but you can't like extend a 10-meter hand to separate yourself from the client and you just walk in and just say, okay, this is what we found. Take it or leave it. And this is my recommendation. Take it or leave it. And then see you next week. I'll get your comments by email. It's just, it's not how it should be done. There's a relationship building. You have to build the trust. It's like any relationship, interpersonal relationship outside of work, within work, even with your colleagues, you have to establish trust. And that's very important with the clients too.
It makes me think of a couple of questions, to be honest, because, when I teach communication strategies to internal audit, I talk a lot about like knowing your audience and doing a deep dive into them. And I have a 14-point structure, things that I call them
Mm-hmm.
pieces of the puzzle. So you
Yep.
may not have all the pieces of a puzzle, but when you do your research on them, then you can kind of figure out some things and then you start building the relationship with them. You have status meetings, update meetings with them and those kinds of things. So does that apply in the public service as well? Do you have those opportunities to create those relationships so that by the time you get to the point where you're presenting the actual results, have a good relationship already?
Yeah, one of the best things that I've witnessed and I've implemented recently is staying in touch with your main point of contacts for the audit on a recurrent basis where you have, let's say, a biweekly touch point. You can discuss any updates on their end that would be relevant to your audit. If they think there are certain individuals within the organization or certain documents that are important for you to review, to interview, it builds that connection because you're listening to them. You're listening to what they have to say, but you're also delivering updates on your end, especially when it comes to those high risk areas that cannot wait until reporting. And they definitely appreciate that, to give them a heads up. Listen, this is not in the audit program, but as we've done our analysis, our interviews, we've seen this being a recurrent issue. It's high risk. Wanted to let you know, how do you want to approach this? Would you want us to like issue an official note about this with a recommendation, and we can support you in escalating it? Or even just giving them a heads up of, so far, so good, everything's going great. You're aligned with all of the expectations that we've had for this. There's minor areas of improvement, but we're going to leave them to the reporting period because they're not that high risk. It's just keeping them in the loop because um, whether it's public sector or private sector, some audits are long. They take 9 months. And if you're only meeting them at the beginning of the audit, and then at the end of the audit, 9 months have elapsed, a lot or not a lot could happen. Who knows? And if you're not being kept up to date with things that have been evolving or new things that your client is doing, you do want to give them credit. You don't, like, a scope is a scope, but if they're doing things to, mitigate a certain risk and you think that it might be helpful, you still want to highlight that. It's not always about reporting negative findings. It's also positive findings.
I think positive aspects are very good too, but 9 months is a long time.
There have
It
been
just
longer.
thinking, 9 months from the opening meeting to like the closing meeting is a super long time. So when you mentioned bi-weekly meetings, that's when I started to think, well, how long are the audits? Because in corporate, you have anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months, maybe on
Mhm.
average, right? There are always exceptions.
Yeah.
you almost want to have a weekly meeting with the right stakeholders in the room so that by the time you get to the closing meeting, everybody knows everything, everybody's aware of the issues and the risks and all of that. Is it the same philosophy for you despite the fact that it's 9 months?
So it depends. This practice, I've been implementing it as a practice that my office has been implementing at the moment for advisory services. In terms of other like actual compliance audits, it it depends. It
Right.
depends how much we find, how high risk it is, whether we really need to alert our OPI about a certain risk.
Hmm.
But definitely the client is kept in the loop so that nothing is a surprise. And there's different levels, right? So in government, it's a little bit different. You're involved with the working level, with director level, and then you've got the assistant deputy ministers, and they're usually the ones that read the final report, but they've been briefed consistently throughout the process by their directors who we're maintaining contact with. So that's very important in relationship building, is that when it gets to that level, nothing is a surprise, and you're wording things properly so as to not point fingers, because you really aren't pointing fingers at individuals. So as long as it's not a surprise, we've had a discussion about the findings, even the how realistic recommendations are. That's also important, because you might be recommending something that is completely unrealistic. There's no capacity, there's no resourcing to achieve those recommendations within a specific timeline. You want to tackle the risk, but in a very realistic way. And obviously, you'll never achieve zero risk. We all know that. It's that level of risk that everyone ends up being comfortable with.
And then you look at budgeting too, right? And then the federal
Hmm.
government changes over and there's a whole lot of factors that can influence that.
For sure. Yes.
Looking ahead, what excites you most about the future of audit?
It's how malleable it is at the moment. It's very exciting how it's continuously evolving, and there's a big appetite for the evolvement. And it's that push of, if you want to be relevant in the profession, you have to evolve with it. And that speaks to everything I stand for. I mean, my biggest sadness was university ending. It's like, what do I do now? How am I going to keep learning? And that's definitely why I ended up doing a master's degree. And at one point I was like, do I do a PhD? I just want to keep learning and like being in that environment. But that's exactly what the state of the profession is at the moment. It's, if you want to stay relevant, you have to continuously learn. You have to always stay abreast of what's going to happen in the future. It's like so future looking that it's so exciting. I mean, I don't see it, and not to be biased, but I don't see it in other professions.
So imagine 10 years from now, if you look back, what would you like your impacts to have been?
Oh my, that's a lot of responsibility to give to one person. I don't even know if I have the influence to look to in 10 years from now have a specific type of influence or impact. Um, but if it were to be one thing, is that all the work that I am currently doing related to the talent gap, it is that it would just help a little bit in 10 years.
I love that. And I do see, though, the impact that you have today, speaking at conferences, working with students, innovation awards. I don't see you stopping innovating. I don't see you stopping being passionate about promoting the internal audit profession with students because you love it so much. So I have this feeling that you will do and you will continue to do great things for the profession. And I'd like to just thank you for your service and for everything you do and for sharing what you do on stages, because this is the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast, and getting out there, like agreeing to do the podcast, getting out there on stages for industry conferences, publishing articles. These are not easy things for everybody.
Mhm.
And the more we do it, the more we show it's possible, and to have confidence and courage and to be brave and to trust in yourself and to get your messages out. So thank you for joining me. It's really been an absolute pleasure. And I leave the last word to you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is definitely a pleasure. And I think we've talked about this before, about how I do all this to inspire younger generation to feel comfortable, especially women, in a very male-dominated field when it comes to business. Even internal audit, we're surrounded by a lot of males that are in higher up positions. So it's definitely important to showcase that it's possible to break the glass ceiling that unfortunately still exists today in 2025. But one thing I really want to say is that I am not here where I am today without every single person that has supported me to be here, that has given me the opportunity to speak at the conferences, that has given me the opportunity to be a guest speaker at the courses at universities, that has believed in me, that said yes. Even when they said no, they actually pushed me to be more hungry to go ask other people. And that's one thing I always say, every no leads you closer to a yes.
I've
And
got that
every
written
person,
down because when I listened to John's podcast, I wrote that down. Every no will lead to a yes. I love that about you.
yeah, I think, and that comes from actually the president of our chapter. I've known him before I joined the chapter as a chair, and he was one of the people who was there since the beginning of me doing my master's degree. He was even part of my focus group when I was writing my thesis, and he always kept in touch to see where it was going. Is it public yet? Can I have a copy of it? And his support meant a lot because there were so many times, and he's the one who pushed me to even consider presenting this framework at a larger capacity. And he said, what's the worst case that could happen? They'll say no. That's fine. You're fine. Your life will continue and you have a job and you're fine and you're good. And I was like, you know what? You're right. The worst thing that could happen is they can say no, but I'm stubborn. So I'm going to go to the next person and ask again until I get my yes. And that really fueled that perspective. And I stick to it to this day. It's okay if you say no. You're actually motivating me even more to go to someone else to get that yes. I truly believe in the vision here, and I truly believe in the outcome that this is going to give. So thank you to everyone who supported me on this journey. I'm definitely not taking ever credit for being here because of just me. It was a lot of people that contributed to this.
Thank you, Perla.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast. We'd love for you to stay part of our growing community, so subscribe wherever you're listening. If you're enjoying our content on platforms like iTunes or Spotify, a quick 5-star rating from you would mean the world to us. It's a small action that supports our mission immensely. Don't forget to explore the show notes for various links and join our vibrant community on all our social media platforms. Your interaction and support play a crucial role in amplifying the voices of inspiring women in audit and spreading their inspiring stories even further. Thank you for being a part of our journey, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Inspiring Women in Audit podcast.